Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're here.
Hi.
Yeah.
Couple chuckle fucks coming at you.
Yeah, this might be a rough one because I'm doing the show sober, but...
Yeah. Hey, it's definitely going to be a rough one.
I like that I throw that in there as if like I'm normally hammered. I do like 90% of our shows without alcohol, but you say that so the first person that listens is like, who's this alcoholic? Like, right. I like him, but no, I'll disappoint you. I'm just trying to pretend to.
I haven't drank in months. It's been a while, so I should have today though. First of all, the introduction.
Honestly. You probably should every day, but
really just burn this fucking life candle out like right away. But yeah, if you haven't heard the show before, this is the Non-Essential Podcast. Every week we tell each other stories, and they can be about whatever or whoever, whenever, what the fuck ever, dude. But you know, they tend to be horror themed anyway, but this month we've been trying to make a concentrated effort to keep the stories scary, which I will totally bomb today.
Which is good, because this is the episode that comes out like right before Halloween.
This is the last episode I bring the story to for October. By the time I do it again, it will be in November, which will be a perfect time to do another creepypasta. But this week I actually wrote my own,
all right,
which we've talked about doing a few times. I think last time we did it was like episode 50, and we and we keep talking about how fun it was to do, but it is a lot of work.
That's what I was going to say. I'm kind of jealous because I've really wanted to do like an original story, but I just haven't had the energy or the time. Well, I found a way around that, and the trick is to not write a very good one. Yeah. Well, that's genius, because I take a lot of energy and time and still accomplish that same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. This one, I'm actually like, you would think doing this show, I would be over any sense of shame, but I'm actually like really cringing hard right now at the idea of having to read this. So, because I wrote it all in one night. I wrote it Tuesday night in like 3 hours. I haven't proofread it, but I know it's bad. And it's like a perfect, I've done these creepypasta episodes, and especially this year, I feel like I've been a bit of a hard ass, like critiquing all of them. So if you ever thought that I was being obnoxious, here's your chance for payback, because I feel like this story is just like a full bingo card of everything I've given every other story shit for. But like I said, I haven't read it since I wrote it, so we'll see what happens.
This will be... Oh, no, I think the first... Because we've done original ones, I think, twice in the past. And like you said, the last time was... way back, I think episode 50, like you said, it was like the start of what we considered season 2, because it makes me number them when I upload them to Apple, podcast. But I think that was the one that we wrote and then swapped. Like I read your story and you read mine. Did we end up doing that? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
I feel like it's more awkward to read your own story, but
yeah. But if I gave this to you, you would not get through it.
Yeah, well, in fairness, I don't get through the other ones I pick either. I am terrible at reading stuff.
But anyway. But feel free to fucking bash it, because Lord knows I'm going to. I didn't even come up with a title. That's how dog shit this is.
No, that's Art House.
But if you know anything about this show, it took us like 10 years to come up with the title for this podcast.
And we still came up with Non-Essential Podcast. Like that was a very like concentrated effort.
And if I remember right, you weren't like, neither one of us were like, oh, that's really good. It was just like, oh, it's so much better than these other things we thought of. All right. One of the perks of this new job was the quiet that came with it. I took it knowing I was going to be jammed in a cubicle doing tedious tasks at a computer all day. I can't say it's the type of job you would want to make a career out of, but it certainly worked as an escape. My previous job was chaotic, loud, and stressful, so I was more than happy to just throw myself into mind-numbing busy work for 5 days a week.
Not to interrupt, but I think you grabbed your diary by accident.
So here's the first thing you can give me shit for. I only know how to write about myself. There's not a creative bone in my body.
Hey, that's what they say, right? What you know.
Yeah, and I'm very self-centered, it turns out. When I went home, I left my work at work, and I no longer felt so overwhelmed by that part of my life. I had been working in the office for a couple months at this point. The place had a small staff, and I'm a pretty shy, reserved person as it is, so I tended to keep to myself. There's no day-to-day water cooler talk, typically. My coworkers were nice people, but unless we were talking about something work-related, you'd usually find me in my cubicle, half invested in some report I was working on, while the other half of my brain would wander. All you would usually hear was the occasional phone ringing, the tapping of keyboards, and maybe some people muttering to themselves as they would grind through their various projects. It was noisy in its own way, but like I said, we might as well have been in space compared to the sound I was used to. At lunch, I would take a walk down to the nearby park by the river, and any unpleasant noise that might be there was easily drowned out with my music. Until this day, when things started to seem just louder. I noticed in the...
Which day? Is it like Monday or Tuesday? Or
I don't remember. Sometime this week.
Yeah.
Probably Tuesday. That's where the story came from. I noticed it in the first hour of my shift with the phones. I would sit at my desk and I would hear people's phones just ring louder and louder. If my own phone rang, it sounded as loud as a gunshot. My coworkers' soft mutterings over their work sounded like it was happening right in my ear. Office equipment was just as annoying. Jesus Christ, how much shit do they need to print? I would think to myself as I heard sheet after sheet of paper get spit out of the printer down the hall. Why was it all so loud? I was huddled at my desk, plugging my ears, trying to stop the voices of whispering coworkers. Fuck, why whisper at all if you can hear them fucking talk anyway? My mentality was far from reasonable here, but I think a lot of us are familiar with this kind of sensory overload, a feeling that you're hearing everything louder but not clearer. You're just suffocating in sounds and you can't even form a thought through the miasma of noise. Somehow these little sounds that might as well have been nothing at all the day before sounded like a never-ending car pileup today that was only happening in my brain. It did not get better.
Yeah, so this just... Now I think you're writing about my life, but it's like... After... Again, I'm going straight to the alcohol reference, because again, talk about or write what you know. But yeah, this just sounds like me at work after a night where I did decide to drink.
That would be the alternative ending, is like, and then I pulled a whiskey bottle out of my drawer, and it got better. The end.
The end.
As my coworkers started to leave for their lunch breaks, I breathed a sigh of relief. This would give me some time to finish up a little bit of work and just let the natural noise of the office die down for a bit. The phone still rang far too much, but the office equipment was not running. The only keyboard and mouse in use was my own. It seemed like my brain was quieting back down for a little bit. But it was unmistakable after about 10 minutes. I could still hear that fucking whispering. It was definitely no longer from my coworkers' desks and offices. I could somehow tell the sounds were further away toward their lunchroom, but that had nothing to do with how loud they sounded. They were still whispers, and they were still just as loud as they were before. They still seemed to be right by my ear. And then through the... I suddenly heard a violent cough cut through all the sounds. It was still coming from that hallway. This disturbing hacking that lasted for maybe a minute, and then... silence. Hoping that a coworker's cough maybe just snapped me out of whatever this was, I grabbed my coat and went to my own lunch. I walked along the river, lost in thought as the music played from my headphones. About halfway through my lunch break, I was not exactly eager to get back to the office, but it felt like stepping outside had helped clear my head. Sounds of cars and people passing by were not nearly as overwhelming. Along the river, some nearby ducks seemed noticeably loud and pissed about something, but I was actually sort of used to their loud, bitchy quacks.
I like that.
That's just a fun little note that, like, turns out. So, like Steve said, this is pretty true to my life right now.
Yeah.
And I walk by this river, and there's a bunch of bridges that you can walk under on some of the paths. And when ducks quack under those, it echoes, and they sound demonic. It could have been a story in its own.
It was, yeah. Quacking up.
Yeah. So I just had to give them their little spotlight.
That's what I liked that line because it brings some, like, I can picture. What I was going to say, it sounds like very condescending or whatever to you. Like, yeah, I can picture your best friends at work being ducks. But
Not wrong.
when I say that, I'm kind of picturing myself, too, because I'm the same way. Like,
Yeah.
like, I go for walks in the morning around my neighborhood, and one of the greatest days of my life so far, like, at least this year, was when I discovered that the far side of my neighborhood abuts right next to a cow pasture, and there were cows there. And it's like, new friends, and they're not people. This is awesome.
And then they move and take a shit in your direction, and it's like, oh, we're not friends. Fuck you.
Well, it's still better than most of my actual relationships. But anyway.
I went down some concrete steps along the side of the river's rapids. This is where I usually would lean against the railing, look at the water, and play around on my phone until it was time to head back. When I looked back up the steps, two things stood out to me. Beside the railing on the grassy cliff that hung above the shallow river, there was a rusted metal figure of a deer. Now, art displays like this were pretty common in this park, but this one was so tucked away from obvious view. The metal also didn't match that of any of the other sculptures you would find along the path. And it honestly looked pretty amazing now that I was finally noticing it. The rust and moss gave it this appearance that the thing grew out of the ground itself. Maybe it was me being so drawn to observing the statue that made me so startled when I noticed a figure was staring down at me from the top of the steps. Just as I turned my head, I only caught the front of the figure's appearance for maybe a second. They were wearing a bright, hooded orange coat. But before I could make out the face or any real details about them, they had turned away from the top of the steps. It was just that uncomfortable feeling where maybe they were just passing by, or they could have been watching me for a while. There were certainly no shortage of people eager to be as weird as possible in this town. So I didn't think too much of it, and I figured it was time to get back to work. I stared at the deer sculpture all the way up the steps. As I was about as close as you could get to it from those steps, I noticed that it had some glass marble in its left eye, just barely reflecting light under a hanging bed of moss. It had mostly lost its color from dirt and time, I imagine, but I could make out slight streaks of some of that same orange shade from the man's coat. And then I heard some more vicious hacking from somebody at the top of the steps. I broke away from...
God damn it, Larry. Have you ever heard of cough drops?
Fucking bronchitis. This is all this story is about. The scariest threat. I broke away from my fixation with the deer and ran up the steps. That cough, I knew that was not a coincidence. Not for it to cut through the music of my headphones. Not for it to be right in my ear like everything else had been today. When I got back to the top of the steps, I didn't see anything. I actually didn't see anyone. This Riverside Park had a decent number of people in it just minutes ago. Now I couldn't see anybody. The nearby playground was empty. The fields of people reading and napping were now completely bare. Even the noisy ducks were gone. What maybe disturbed me the most was that the river itself seemed to run softer now. The crashing current against the rock had gradually turned into a trickle. It felt almost slowed down in time. It was definitely time to head back. This soft trickling sound of the river was somehow feeling so much louder than when it was flowing normally, and now the whispers came back. Part of me recognized familiar voices in them, and part of me could not tell you where they actually came from. I could still only make out a little bit of what was being said. I see. I see. I turned up my music to full volume and was really trying to hustle back to the nearest exit from the park path that would get me back up to a main road. Something was wrong with me. I needed this outside noise to just stop. The cough had joined the whispers now. It was the same voice or the same voices. You are seen. I steadily made it through the now empty park when I reached the part of the path where it split two ways. You could either keep going down the path as normal or cross a bridge where the river forked. At the far end of the bridge was that metal deer. Same pose, same feeling that no matter where you stood, that one eye was gazing at you. You know the way. Why did I turn around to look back where I came from? Again, I was just overcome with that feeling that I might have been watched for maybe a second or for the entire time I had been out here. And the man in the orange coat stared back at me. Maybe he was 50 yards away. His hood was up, so I couldn't see any features, but his head was obviously cocked to one side, as if he was still figuring something out about what he had been observing. Both hands sat in his pockets until he removed one gloved hand and began coughing intensely into it. I could just barely make out an expulsion of mist with every dramatic, exaggerated hack. I turned and ran up the path. There was another bridge up ahead that could get me to a path back to a main city road. My brain was filled with sounds at this point, the coughing, the whispers, my blaring music, and frustrated, scared screams that in retrospect were definitely my own. All the sounds blurred into an unbearable cyclone. I don't know what I thought I would find when I reached the bridge on the other side of the river's fork. I probably should have known better, judging from the way this had played out to this point. Whatever this was, it was determined to keep me here. Of course, when I reached the bridge, the deer statue stood on the other side, and the man in orange leaned against the sculpture as if he had been waiting for hours. You have been hurt. That is really hard to do.
Yeah, and it's coming across pretty good, except with Discord, it almost just sounded like you whispered, "Do you have herpes?"
That could be the line. It's open to interpretation. The hood hid so many details of his face, but through the black mist that he coughed out, I couldn't make out any more than a clean-shaven jawline and a slight smile just above it. He began to walk towards me, and something compelled me to walk out onto the bridge to meet him. Maybe it was just the futility of the situation. I honestly don't know. This silence. The man steadily walked towards me and pulled a long, curved blade from his coat pocket. I looked at the bridge railing as he drew closer. I imagined jumping into the cold October river below, maybe snapping out of this, maybe waking up in a hospital, but awake from this nightmare. He kept walking. He kept smiling. Maybe I was dead no matter what I did. He kept coming closer. Maybe what he had planned for me was worse. He kept coming. The whispers, his cough. If everything would just shut up and let me think. He kept coming. I need silence. His knife rose. The end.
Well, it's the worst thing I've ever heard.
On a scale of 1 to 10, go fuck yourself.
No, it's funny because it's something I would have never thought of writing as a theme. But honestly, like having like noises like that in my head that I can't not hear.
Yeah, this was like totally inspired by like literally at work. It was either Monday or Tuesday, and just all the noises like like I say, yeah, I say it in the story. We all kind of have moments of that sort of like everything's just too loud and chaotic.
Yeah, and every little thing, and part of your brain's telling you like it's ridiculous to get like annoyed and frustrated and upset and angry about like the wind blowing outside the window or something, but you're just in a headspace where you can't handle all that distraction. And that, like, I was surprised how quickly I identified with that part of the story.
So there was a couple things like that sense of like panic when you do have those moments. Like not like I'm not running out of the office because, you know, somebody's typing too loud, you know, but there is a sense of like you're just overwhelmed and you can't focus for a little bit. And so there was a sense of like, here I am talking about it like I made some master work. Like I said, I think there's a good idea in this story. I don't think I quite nailed it, but it was 3 hours. But I
enjoyed it. I was like sitting here trying to like find things to pick apart and I don't know.
Well, that's nice of you, but let me do it. But I did want to like write a story that put a character, me, in that position where you're just the sounds you're not thinking reasonably, because I think it's kind of a cop out, but your horror story always has to ultimately have your protagonists start making rash decisions, maybe not even bad decisions, but they're not thinking clearly.
Well, that's a classic theme. It's because you almost need it. You watch a lot of like horror movies, and that's why, like, as an audience, especially things like, you know, and I'm not a horror movie person, but like your classic Friday the 13th and like Halloween and those ones. They completely rely on characters making the worst possible fucking decision, because if they were like thinking clearly like a rational person, they'd be able to like just stroll away like that was easy.
Like hiding in a bedroom when the killer, hiding in a bedroom closet when the killer knows you're already in the bedroom. You know, it's like you need to escape. That
stupid, and I think it's an insurance commercial, but where they're poking fun at that, and there's a bunch of kids out in the woods being chased by a maniac, and the one character's like, let's get in this running car and leave, and the others are like, no, that's stupid, let's hide behind the chainsaws. And it's like, that's you need that kind of decision making for the story.
Well, and like
work.
I said, like a good story they don't need to be that, you know, obviously dumb about it, but there has to be an element that your characters aren't thinking clearly.
And it's not necessarily unrealistic either, because I like to consider myself, I put myself down constantly, but I do consider myself a relatively intelligent person. Yeah. But as soon as you get scared or hit by just something unexpected, it's very easy for your brain to just do stupid fucking things.
I mean, like, I think a running theme in our podcast is we both think we're relatively intelligent, but part of us also knows that we're completely stupid in the way human beings all are, you know? So put a guy in a bad situation and watch him fuck up, and we're not above that. The other thing, and it's like a lot, I think people will hear the story and be like, why is it a guy in an orange coat? One, I actually was being watched by someone in an orange coat on my
his
walk.
hands were in his pocket doing something different than coughing.
I had to take it from an R to a PG-13 for this show. So murder was better than him jacking it. Jacking it into the jacking it. But it also kind of appealed to me. Like I watch a lot of like old Japanese and like Korean horror movies, and there's something in those that I've noticed where like the monster or the killer or whatever, like it's not that kind of cliche. It's a completely black, you know, shadowy figure. Like that can be scary too, but there's something just as unnerving to me as something that's like bright and colorful, acting the way one of those dark, mysterious monsters would.
Yeah, I mean, I would say even that's always an interest, and you can get into lots of like art theory and movie theory and whatever about using unexpected like color palettes, and it does create some cool situations there. But even just the thought of, if I'm like at the park or something, if there's like a shadowy creature, that'd be terrifying. Kind of a like person with like a hood up, and they're like just standing off like in a distance. You look at that and you're like, well, that's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. But there's something almost more terrifying about the person that like doesn't bother hiding anything about themselves. That's just like also standing there staring. Because then it tells you that there's like probably some disconnect there too. Like totally. At least the one that's like hiding their features, you think, well, they know that to like not do anything rash.
Yeah. Like that's a good point. Like it reminds me of like how, like humans have evolved to pick up threats in obscure ways, and part of that means we have an overactive imagination, and we'll see shadows when there aren't any, and it makes us jumpy, but it was to protect ourselves. And like you said, there is something a little more intimidating to me about like something that doesn't need to hide. And another thing that kind of inspired it, like I wish I could get it across. I wish I was a good writer. But I'm 30 now and I only have the confidence to say I'm a bad writer. Which is still better than what I used to say, which is I'm not a writer. So I'm progressing, but I wish I could have captured it. 'Cause in my mind, I don't know if you ever watched the show before. It's an anime. But it was called Paranoia Agent.
I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it.
In that show, there's like, that show is so weird, and I need to kind of rewatch it to remember exactly what happens and how it tells its story, because it jumps around a lot with people going crazy. But the main setup is there's this killer called Lil Slugger, who's this boy on roller skates wielding like a baseball bat, and he always has this fucking awful grin, and he just attacks people at night. And like you say, he's really colorful. There's no hiding anything about him. And to me, the fucking killer in this, in my mind's eye, was sort of that same thing of just like this killer who was completely confident about what he was doing, and it was other forces at work,
Yeah.
Yeah. But definitely look into that show. At least look up a picture of Lil Slugger and realize I don't have an original thought in my body.
None of us do. That's the problem. All you can do is take other people's thoughts and like try to hopefully spin them enough that people don't notice.
Right. But there's a clear point in this story where you can tell it got to 11 o'clock. And I decided, fuck it, I need to go to bed.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I was going to have critique, we could certainly sit and like pick apart any, because you could take some of the best.
Because we literally do against other people's stories, so feel free.
But, and it's one of those, and it's probably being more lenient because we know each other, which is fun instead of being assholes on. But it does have, I'd say, if the common things that we see in stories, and I still felt that they weren't as
it's not the worst story we've brought to this show.
Yeah. But it did have that where like the pacing, like
it's bad,
especially towards the end. Yeah, it like felt a little rushed.
Because I was tired.
And it kind of feels like one of those that like it was you follow. Like the only part that was a little disconnect for me is when the character's like, oh, by this point, like I knew I was probably screwed anyway, so whatever. But it felt like
rushed,
yeah, like it wasn't quite developed because it felt like he shouldn't be at that point yet.
And that's what I mean is like, this is somebody's payback for all that shit I've talked, because my like number one complaint about pretty much every story you've brought to the show, and a lot of the ones I brought to the show, was pacing, and this story is horrendously paced.
But at least it's horrendously paced in a way that is bearable to me, because usually the problem's the opposite, that things are the unimportant things are way overdeveloped.
Yeah.
When it's rushed, it just feels rushed. When you belabor like nothing, then that makes it a slog to get through, and that's way worse in my books.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of creepypasta, because rushing it, you could say, oh, well, maybe the characters like doom realization or whatever you want to call that point in the story wasn't fully developed, but it's understood in the context because it's a horror story. But
like I said, I think there's a good idea in this story. I don't think I nailed it. And that's, if I'm going to give myself the blasting I give other creepypastas, I'm also going to give myself the same cop-out, which is it was a 3-hour writing exercise
right.
to see what I could throw together for this show. And it was fun to do.
And I feel like it was better than in my 3 hours. The last thing that I kind of wrote, like just original, I think I got 2 paragraphs and it probably took me 45 minutes. So
it's always harder to start. This one, it was more, I needed to find a way to end it because I was tired.
My biggest disappointment is as soon as you mentioned the deer and then a figure in orange, I picture Hunter, and I was hoping the character was going to be murdered by Elmer Fudd.
I should have made that the voice. I actually like the Hunter connection. Believe it or not, I did not make that connection on my own.
See, I live in a part of the world. I imagine yours is similar though, but like, I feel like I'm the only adult male in my city that doesn't hunt.
Yeah, it feels like that here too.
We were talking about that. My wife has a friend, and it's going to be funny because she has another friend that I'm not talking about. And they actually listen to the show at least sometimes, so I'm not talking about you. But she has another friend whose husband. She always wants to like get together and have. And now they live out of state, so at least that's kind of whatever. But she's always like, "Oh, and you can hang out with the husband. I think you two would get along." And like in fairness, the husband's a perfectly great guy, but he's one of these 100% like guns and hunting and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I am not interested in that at all. There is no common like whatever there.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm the kind of person to try to like just hang out and have a conversation with somebody like that where you don't have that common interest. It's like the most mentally exhausting thing I can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, my whole point to that story was that, I live in an area where I'm very used to being surrounded by hunters, especially this time of year. So as soon as you said orange jacket, that was the mental connection I made.
Yeah. Like I said, I wish I had made that connection because a lot of people will be like, well, what did the deer represent? I don't fucking know.
Well, that's what I was waiting for that tie-in. I was also going to ask, I was kind of hoping that the deer was based on something that...
It was. Good. That statue was actually there, and I hadn't noticed it the first 5 times I walked by it, and then, like, I noticed it the other day, and it's weird.
That makes me happy to know that was real, because that was a really cool sounding thing.
Yeah, I wish I fucking was smart enough to make that Hunter connection. Because then I could have actually tied it together. Instead, I just have this weird fucking deer image that nobody knows what to do with. Or I'll give them credit, and they probably thought of Hunter before I did. And I'll just play it off from now on like, yeah, totally meant to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's still kind of... Well, now it doesn't because we got you to say that, oh, no, I didn't do that on purpose. But even without, like, an overt connection... Like the way the character kept seeing the deer, like everywhere he tried to go.
Yeah.
If you make the connection with orange and hunter and deer, it's like the hunter's still the hunter, and the deer, could symbolize the prey, but it's actually luring you, the prey, the character of the prey, to the hunter. So like that would all work, but apparently it worked by accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's I'm dumb and. I should be nowhere near a keyboard.
Or you're just so genius that you're genius on a subconscious level. Like, you don't even have to consciously think about...
I'm abstract. My world allows for killers and deer and orange that have nothing to do with each other, man.
The only other Orange connection I made is I've got the Browns game on my phone in the background here, so it's like, oh, it's a Browns fan. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's like how the Browns are currently killing my fantasy football hopes.
Well, I don't know. They started that way, but they're...
I just saw it was 10-0 still, so that's fine. I win by 10. Just...
Oh. Well, Odell Beckham Jr. just hurt himself, but that might be a boost for the Cleveland, to be honest.
They'll rally and win 40-0 now.
He just had a route in the middle of the show where he ran out. It was one of those real short button hook routes, and he runs out and just slipped and fell on his face, and the ball hit him in the back.
He just needs to.
Yeah,
it's bad juju for him.
Yeah. But anyway, this isn't a sports show, and we're putting it at the end of the show instead of the beginning now. But
I'm glad like I said, I'm pouring embarrassment sweat just doing this. But
no, I actually thought it was really.
But it was a lot of fun.
I was ready for it to be horrible the way you build it up, but you do the thing I think a lot of us do that I do. Where it's like, oh, this is the word. I really don't want to read it. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's the same when we bring other creepypastas on. I'm way too harsh on those, and I'm way too harsh on myself. When the reality is that we're all just doing okay. You know? The
other genius thing you did is you just brought a whole new market segment to our show with the ASMR. I think that's what it's called. Stuff
that is also real. That was God, dude. Like I said, my coworkers are nice people, but hearing all the fucking time was I want to throw myself out the window sometimes, man.
The only thing that would have made me probably scream and run away in actual horror is if you got into the coworkers eating loudly, because that makes me want to if I
just
ever
lip smacking down the hallway.
Yeah.
This isn't scary stories to tell in the dark. I wouldn't do that to
you. Yeah, because I cannot handle the other noise. It gets it can get on your nerves. Like you said, any of us can get overwhelmed at any time. Loud eating, especially if I can fucking hear you smacking your lips and stuff in a different room, that's justifiable homicide.
I want to put a little speaker at your desk and hide it and just smack my lips.
That's why I barely know anything. I know that ASMR stuff exists, but I have avoided it like the plague, because I feel like it's the kind of thing that if I listen to it, especially if you got the wrong stuff, because a lot of it's 47 minutes of this person licking the microphone. It's I would I don't know what I would do. I think my head would literally explode in rage.
It's
the fact that people seek it out on purpose is mind-boggling to me, but whatever.
When we were kids, I was the little brother, so my older brother, he would kick my ass a lot. The first time I ever hit him and I physically started a fight with him was when he was smacking his lips and wouldn't stop. I mean, we were we were little kids, but
shit. When I was probably in high school, or at least close. I remember going out to eat with my parents. My dad was notorious for it because he had fillings and crowns, on his teeth and stuff, and he would just sit there, and he still does it, but now I'm better at avoiding him. But he'd just sit there and suck on his teeth and stuff, and it got so bad one time we were out to eat that I literally just fucking got up and left the restaurant. and then they got pissed at me. I'm well, it was either that or I scream at you in the middle of this place. So I don't know. Like I said,
no
it's
teeth
something
for you. You gum it from now on.
I cannot deal with that sound. I don't get it, but I mean I do get it, but it's not pleasant.
Yeah. It's always little shit like that sticks with you. But like I said with this story, the whole idea was just when you think you're kind of away from a chaotic area, it's those little fucking sounds that dig in the hardest and make you go fucking crazy.
Or maybe we're already crazy and those are just
well, we're definitely already crazy. It's but the mask falls off pretty fucking quick when lip smacking starts.
And loud whispering and making photocopies for no goddamn reason. Stop it.
Holy shit, dude. It's like, how many... Because I print shit at work all the time, like, but I don't need that many sheets. What the fuck is going on?
Fortunately for me, it's just me and my wife at our office, and my printer, it's at least, what is it, at least 24 years old. It's an old HP Jet printer, laser jet, like black and white printer, and it still fucking runs, but it literally sounds like a airplane taking out, like it sounds like a jet now, but it still runs, and I'm... Yeah. The day it dies, I'm going to be so sad because they just... Yeah.
The printer at my job is like as loud as like a transformer and about the size of a transformer. And so it's amazing
how how few advancements we've made in the last 3 decades with like personal printing technology.
You know how horrified I was when I got my current job and like they told me they still fax stuff. And I was like, fucking
well,
why?
Yeah, because you're tied in with the healthcare. It's the two, because we still have to use fax, but it's not us. It's because we deal with banks. And for some reason, most banks still want to fax everything.
Yeah, it's disgusting. This shit needs to stop.
They'll call us and they'll ask for our fax number so they can fax us a piece of paper that's got about a paragraph worth of information on it. They could have just fucking told me on the phone when they called and asked for the fax number. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you people?
Yeah.
But
and so many times they like email like, hey, is this the right fax number? It's like, you're emailing me. You're already emailing me. Just send it. Like, goddamn. Anywho, yeah, that's it for my contribution to Halloween spooky fun time.
Way to wrap it up, like right as they go into halftime on my Browns game too. So.
Yeah. Hey, that's been the same every week. So
yeah, that gives me time to go get drunk.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But anyway, no, I liked the story. I like that's what's ending our October shows because we'll record my recordings next week and it'll technically be recorded in October, but it won't post until November. So
yeah, I
guess I'm going to have to get to work on a Thanksgiving theme. We got to do all themed shows now.
Well, the Pilgrims and the Indians was probably the ultimate horror story you could bring to the show. So.
Well, yeah, but I'm not the right person to tell the correct horror side of that. But anyway, yeah, I enjoyed it, and hopefully the listeners did, or they didn't. That's great too. If you didn't, I like that just as much.
Nobody fucking talks to us anyway about it, so I'll never know. So
when they do, it's the awkward like, "Hey, that story you were ripping. Thanks for doing it. That I wrote it," and you're like, "Hi, yeah, cool. Hey, wanna autograph or something?" I don't know what to say here.
Yeah.
But anyway.
You all remember when Ben was finally brutally killed by the entire creepypasta community?
Hell, they wrote a creepypasta about it. And he came back from the grave and panned it.
That's a good setup, man. The fucking creepypasta critic that wouldn't die. And I like it the most because it's about me again.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for listening. Happy Halloween. We'll see you all in hell.
That was that's the classic Halloween line, but given the most it's the kids leaving the horror house, like the whatever, and you're like, oh, thanks for coming, kids. I'll see you in I guess hell.
I don't know. I think that's my best sign off.